crossroads of fate, the air on Sylvia always shimmered like it held secrets. Commander Elijah Blackwood crouched behind a jagged, crystalline outcrop, his eyes scanning the violet-hued underbrush. His breath came slow, controlled. Somewhere in this eerie forest, something was watching him. A moment earlier, his suit sensors had picked up a heat signature, erratic, fast, unnatural. Not animal, not silid, something else. He tightened his grip on the sidearm holstered to his thigh, though part of him prayed he wouldn't need it. 6 months on this alien frontier had taught him one thing: if it glowed too much, don't trust it. Sylvia's forest pulsed with bioluminescence, as though the entire ecosystem breathed in slow rhythms. Tree-like stalks arched overhead, their bark translucent, their veins lit from within. Roots pulsed faintly beneath his boots. Somewhere far behind him, a lieutenant's voice crackled over the comm status. Check. Commander Elijah ignored it. His instincts were sharper than any scanner, and right now they screamed one word: trap. He advanced through the dense underbrush, every movement practiced in quiet. The atmosphere here was thick with suspended crystal particulates, beautiful but suffocating. This wasn't a casual recon mission anymore. The heat signature had reappeared. Closer. He turned to check his flank and crack! The ground underfoot gave way. He stumbled hard, crashing through a tangle of vines and glowing moss. Pain shot up his shoulder as he rolled, dust and spores flying around him like microscopic fireworks. He cursed under his breath, heart pounding. As he pushed himself up, he froze. Something lay ahead, something small. At first he thought it was a broken drone, metallic shimmer, compact shape. But as his eyes adjusted, Elijah's pulse stuttered. It was a body, roughly 2 feet tall, humanoid but clearly alien. The creature lay crumpled in the moss, delicate lavender skin faintly illuminated by the undergrowth. Long lavender hair flowed in a ponytail across her back, and her attire, if one could call it that, looked like a metallic bikini forged from stardust. Every inch of her shimmered like a living gemstone. Her form was too refined, too symmetrical to be artificial. She wasn't machinery, she was alive. He approached slowly, warily. His suit's AI detected a faint energy pulse, organic, weak but steady. She was unconscious, possibly injured. Elijah crouched and gently scooped her up in both gloved hands. To his surprise, she was warm. Warmer than any Psyllid he'd encountered in brief diplomatic exchanges. Her skin felt soft against the synthetic fibers of his gloves, and she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. Elijah blinked. Her iridescent gaze locked onto his, and for a moment time fractured. Her pupils sparkled with impossible depth, like compressed galaxies in motion. Awe surged in his chest, and then she screamed, "Please don't eat me." Her voice was high-pitched, melodic, and laced with what sounded like a cross between terror and flirtation. "I know I'm small and probably look delicious, but I taste terrible, really, just awful. You'd regret it, I promise." Elijah nearly dropped her. Then, despite himself, he laughed. Just once. Short and sharp. It burst from him like a popped valve, catching him off guard. But when he saw her trembling, that laughter vanished. He composed himself quickly. "Easy there, little one," he said, voice low and reassuring. "I'm not gonna eat you, I promise." She blinked rapidly, looking up at him, her tiny hands clinging to his gloved fingers. "You're not," she whispered, "but you're enormous. And all the stories say that giant aliens devour smaller species. They say your kind snacks on things our size." "Well, they're wrong," Elijah said gently. "Humans don't eat sentient beings, especially not ones who talk back so eloquently." He paused, giving her a small nod. "Commander Elijah Blackwood, Earth Special Operations. And you are." She tilted her head, still wary but clearly intrigued. "Lilia," she said softly, "I'm a Psyllid, native to this planet, though we tend to stay hidden, far away from giants." Elijah chuckled. "I can see why." Her eyes scanned his face, lingering at his jawline before darting away. "Though none of our stories mentioned how handsome the giants might be," she added almost too quietly. Elijah's ears went hot. He cleared his throat. "Well, Lilia, it's a pleasure. But tell me, what were you doing out here unconscious in the moss?" She looked away, embarrassed. I was collecting glowing moss for our healing chambers. It's sensitive to lunar cycles. We can only harvest it on certain nights. I must have slipped and hit my head on a crystal node. Her eyes widened suddenly. Oh no, the moss, my collection bag. Elijah scanned the area. A few feet away, he spotted a small, shimmering pouch tangled in vines. That it? He asked. Yes, she squealed, then immediately steadied herself, clearing her throat. I mean, yes, that's it. Would you, would you mind? He knelt, letting her sit comfortably in one hand while using the other to retrieve the pouch. Here you go, but maybe rest a bit before heading back. That head injury could be worse than it looks. Lilia held the pouch to her chest, then looked up at him with eyes full of starlight. Would you sit with me a while, just until the dizziness fades, and maybe tell me about your world? Elijah smiled, settling on a fallen crystal log. He held her up near his chest so their eyes were level. I'd like that, he said, but only if you tell me about yours too. It's a deal, she said, curling up in his palm. Though I should warn you, I might keep you talking until moonrise. Elijah leaned back slightly, enchanted. I've got nowhere else to be. The heart between crystals. The forest deepened around them as twilight descended. Elijah sat still, letting the warmth of Lilia's presence ground him in this surreal moment. Despite her tiny stature, her voice carried a weight that was oddly calming, like listening to a song written before language existed. She pointed to a cluster of glowing stalks that pulsed with a rhythm Elijah hadn't noticed before. These are lumia trees, she explained. They respond to emotional energy. That one's glowing brighter because you're curious. Elijah raised an eyebrow. They can tell that. They can feel it, she corrected with a soft smile. Everything on Sylvia listens. He let that settle in. The concept of an ecosystem that responded to emotions instead of just physical stimuli was foreign to him, yet undeniably elegant. It made his world with its steel walls and sterile algorithms feel suddenly flat. And your people, the sea lead, do you always live this deep in the forest? Lilia nodded, her gaze distant. We don't build cities. We grow them. Our homes are carved into living crystal. We harmonize with the land, not control it. She ran a hand along the edge of his glove. It's safer to stay hidden. Giants don't always ask before they step. Elijah winced at that, not because it was unfair, but because it was often true. But you stepped gently, she added, even before you saw me. He looked away, slightly unsettled by how easily she read him. 6 months on this planet, and the only things that don't shoot first are the plants. That made her laugh, a sound like tiny wind chimes swirling in moonlight. I've never met a human before, she admitted. We only hear stories. Let me guess, big, scary, full of teeth. And weapons, she added. One tale claims your kind eats planets. He grinned. Only when we're very hungry. She tilted her head. Then why are you really here? Elijah Blackwood. The question came with surprising force. For a second, he considered giving her the polished EarthGov answer: resource diplomacy, strategic outreach, something vague and safe. But those galaxy-filled eyes had a way of stripping away pretense. I needed a break, he admitted, from orders, from reports, from pretending I care about meetings with people who measure lives in budget units. Lilia's expression softened. That's not the answer I expected. Me neither, he muttered. They sat in silence, surrounded by bioluminescence that shifted as the sky darkened. Insects hummed harmoniously with the gentle breeze. The world here was alive in ways Elijah had never truly understood. What about you, he asked. Is collecting moss a full-time job, or do you moonlight as a glowing diplomat? She chuckled, resting against his palm. I'm a resonance tender. I help maintain the crystal harmonics in our healing chambers and communication towers. So, a biotechnician, a healer, and now apparently a moss hunter. And maybe, she said, drawing tiny circles on his glove, an ambassador. He raised an eyebrow. To whom? To you, she said. You're not what we feared. That makes you dangerous, in a different way. He narrowed his eyes. Dangerous how? Because now I'm not sure I want you to leave. The air between them shifted. Elijah's heart beat faster than his training liked. He looked down at her, this alien girl, barely the size of a house cat, and saw a depth that defied logic. Her world had every reason to fear humans, and yet she was here, open and teasing, vulnerable, brave. She stood slowly, walking across his palm like a runway of light. Elijah. Yeah, if I fall again, will you catch me? He didn't hesitate, always. For a moment, neither moved. Then, without warning, Lilia yawned. The glow of her skin flickered briefly, a sign of fatigue. You should rest, he said. Head bumps and flirting don't mix well. She smirked sleepily. You think that was flirting? He matched her smirk. I'm trained in 23 dialects of diplomacy, Lilia, and whatever that wasn't entirely professional. She settled back into his palm, sighing in contentment. Good. As the moons of Sylvia rose above the treetops, casting twin shadows across the forest, Elijah sat in stillness, holding a tiny ambassador who might just change the course of his life. Neither of them said another word, but everything around them pulsed with a new kind of harmony. Crystalline beasts in an unspoken pact. The morning arrived with a hush, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Elijah had returned to his post before dawn, but he couldn't focus on the stack of mission reports waiting on his datapad. Numbers blurred. Maps meant nothing. His thoughts were back in the forest with the girl who glowed like starlight and spoke of trees that listened to feelings. When Lieutenant Richards passed him on the upper deck, the older man raised a brow. Going for another walk, sir. Environmental reconnaissance, Elijah said deadpan. Richards smirked. Just don't fraternize with the local wildlife. Elijah didn't bother answering. He was already gone. The forest welcomed him like an old friend. The glow of the lumia trees intensified as he passed. His suit picked up minor anomalies in crystal resonance, but he tuned them out. One signal drew his focus, the now familiar pulse of life that fluttered in ways no scanner could quantify. You came back. Her voice floated down like music through a cathedral. Elijah looked up. Lilia stood on a crystal branch, lavender skin, glistening with dew, her metallic attire gleaming with more intricate patterns than before. She seemed brighter. I gave my word, didn't I? He replied, extending a hand. She leapt gracefully, landing in his palm with effortless balance. There was no hesitation this time, no fear. She settled cross-legged like it was a throne built just for her. I spent half the night convincing our elders not to flee the village, she said, brushing wind-tousled hair from her face. Apparently your not eating me wasn't convincing enough. I hope you were persuasive. Oh, I was. I told them how you rescued me, how your eyes hold more kindness than any creature I've met. She paused. I might have omitted the part about how attractive I find you. Elijah's face burned. Lilia, don't worry, she said, waving dismissively. Among my people, it's normal to be direct. Life is too short to hide what the heart wants. He studied her. Humans aren't quite that open. But you are curious about me. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. She smiled, and for a moment it felt like gravity had shifted, like the weight of her gaze could bend the air. But then her expression turned serious. That's not why I asked you here. She stood, her small frame suddenly filled with a quiet intensity. We need your help. Elijah's smile faded. What's wrong? 3 days ago, a child was taken. His jaw tightened. By who? By what she corrected. Shard claws. She stepped to the edge of his hand, pointing toward the glowing forest. They used to avoid our settlements. Now they come closer. They destroy healing chambers. They've never attacked before. Something's changed. Elijah listened, already mapping possibilities in his mind. What are they? Crystalline beasts, our size. Your strength, jagged, fast, brutal. We can't fight them, not like you can. She looked up, voice trembling. Will you help us? There was no hesitation. Yes, she blinked. Just like that. You don't even want to know what's in it for you. You need to help protecting children from monsters. That's all I need to know. Lilia stared at him, unblinking. Then with a breathless sigh, she stepped closer, so close that her tiny arms could wrap around his thumb. The elders warned me humans were dangerous, that your size made you careless. But they never mentioned the size of your heart. Elijah gently curled his finger in response, a silent promise. Tell me everything, he said. Habits, weaknesses, behavior. I need to know what we're facing. Lilia nodded and began pacing his palm as she explained. Shard claws absorbed energy from natural crystals. The Silid had tried using their resonance techniques to disrupt the energy, but their size made it impossible to generate enough force. A few warriors had wounded one, but the cost had been too high. What if, Elijah said slowly, we combined your knowledge with my strength? Could you teach me to use resonance? She stopped, stunned. Yes. but it would require very close contact. Her cheeks turned darker lavender. I would need to guide your movements, touch your skin, sync our breathing, our focus. Elijah raised an eyebrow. I can handle that. Can you? She teased, leaping onto his shoulder. Her hands brushed his neck. Then your first lesson begins now. A jolt of energy raced down his spine, not from danger, but something entirely else. Close your eyes, she whispered. As the forest pulsed around them, Elijah obeyed. He listened, and for the first time he felt the heartbeat of a planet. Resonance and wrist. The first thing Elijah noticed was the hum. It wasn't sound, it was sensation, like standing too close to a power core, except it wasn't mechanical. It was alive. A gentle thrum that echoed through his rib cage, vibrating in perfect counterpoint to his heartbeat. Lilia was pressed against his neck, no bigger than a pendant, her hands resting just below his jawline. Her breath tickled his skin. Her voice was low, reverent. Don't force it. Let the crystal speak to you. He exhaled slowly. All around them, the luminescent forest had fallen into stillness. The trees no longer swayed. The vines no longer shimmered. Even the insects had quieted. It was as if the entire world were holding its breath to watch them. Lilia moved carefully along his shoulder, tracing a slow line down his collarbone. Elijah didn't flinch, but the hairs on his arms rose like static. Focus here, she said, placing her palm over the center of his chest plate. The crystal energy doesn't respond to thought. It responds to intention. His eyes remained closed. He thought of the child taken, of the village trembling behind glowing walls, of Lilia's eyes wide with desperation. He reached for that feeling, the desire to protect, and projected it outward. Nothing happened. Too much control, Lilia murmured as if reading his mind. You're trying to weaponize it. Try surrendering. That word hit something buried. Elijah opened his eyes. I don't surrender. She looked at him with quiet understanding. That may be your problem. Their gazes locked, a current passing between them. Then Lilia reached both arms upward and pulled herself onto the curve of his neck, legs straddling the muscle just below his ear. Let me guide you. He nodded, once jaw tight. She pressed her forehead to his skin, and this time Elijah felt it, the shift. A sudden clarity like sunlight piercing a fog. The crystals around them pulsed in sync, a soft wave of light rippling outward. He could feel her rhythm, her breathing, her heartbeat, even the subtle flicker of hesitation she tried to hide. Do you feel it now? She whispered. I feel everything, he said, voice rougher than intended. They moved together, his fingers following her instructions, tracing patterns in the air, shaping invisible threads of force. Lilia guided each motion with minute touches across his shoulder blade, down his bicep, across the pulse point of his wrist. Each touch left a trail of warmth that had nothing to do with energy. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Elijah had managed to project a coherent resonance wave, brief but powerful. A low pulse of crystal energy that left a scorch mark in the moss. You're a fast learner, Lilia said, perched once again on his shoulder. Most Silid take weeks to reach that level. I had an excellent teacher, he replied, glancing at her. They were close, very close. Her legs draped down his shoulder, one hand resting casually at the base of his neck. The size difference still existed, but somehow it no longer felt like a barrier. Not when her voice could still his thoughts. Not when her touch could guide power through him like fire in his veins. She leaned closer. There's something else you should know. What? When our resonance connects with another species, it's not just physical energy. It opens emotional pathways. Like a feedback loop. The more you care, the stronger the connection becomes. He frowned. That sounds dangerous. For who? She tilted her head, a sly smile curling her lips. You or me? He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because somewhere between her first touch in this moment, something had shifted in him. The mission, the protocol, the chain of command, they all felt distant now, like signals from a dying satellite. What mattered now was this girl, this impossibly small, defiant, brilliant girl who could bend the forest to her will and still laugh like chimes in the wind. She looked at him, eyes shimmering like galaxies. There's a battle coming, Elijah. You and I will fight it together. But you should know, her voice softened to a murmur. I'm no longer afraid of being devoured. He turned his head slowly until their eyes met again, breath close enough to merge. Neither am I. And the crystals around them glowed brighter than they ever had before. The first battle. Dusk fell like a slow exhale across Sylvia's bioluminescent forest. The air thickened cooler now, but humming with invisible threads of tension. Elijah crouched low behind a massive crystal outcrop, its jagged angles refracting pale light in every direction. His suit's HUD pinged three crystalline lifeforms approaching. Fast, unstable resonance, massive energy output. Beside his neck, Lilia sat still, knees drawn to her chest, her skin glowing faintly with silver-blue flickers. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. She was focused. Three of them, she whispered, breath warm against his skin. They're bigger than we expected. His fingers flexed instinctively. We can handle it. She gave a small, brave nod. Then the forest cracked open. From the underbrush emerged monsters. They were unlike anything Elijah had seen, 8 feet tall at the shoulder, armor-plated in jagged crystal growths. Their bodies pulsed red each step, causing the ground beneath them to vibrate. Claws the size of daggers, faces like shattered obsidian. Their presence warped the air with distorted light and pressure. The lead creature sniffed once, then turned directly toward them. It roared. The sound wasn't just audible, it was tactile, a concussive pulse that slammed into Elijah's chest like a hammer. Crystal fragments shattered nearby. His earpiece screamed static. His suit recalibrated on the flail. Now, Lilia said. Elijah rose in one fluid motion, his hands moving through the air in the pattern she'd drilled into him for hours, his arms tracing sharp, graceful arcs, like drawing sigils through smoke. At the same moment, Lilia's tiny form pressed her palms into his neck, guiding the resonance. The crystals answered. A surge of energy erupted from his palms, a blinding wave of concentrated light. The lead shard claw took it full force, sent flying backward with a screech, its body crackling with overloaded resonance. Red light turned white hot before shattering into 1,000 shards. Elijah stood in shock. That was, knew Lilia finished breathlessly. In training, you never push that much. I wasn't this angry in training. The remaining 2 beasts didn't hesitate. One charged low claws skimming the forest floor. The other vaulted over a tree descending from above. Left, Lilia shouted. He rolled sideways, letting the low one swipe past. As he turned, Lilia pulsed a burst of light upward through his shoulder. He lifted his hand instinctively, and a crystalline shield burst into existence above him, just in time to block the descending claws of the second beast. They hit the ground hard. Combat now. Elijah fought like he'd trained his entire life for this moment. He ducked and weaved, every movement calculated. But it was more than just tactics. Every time he shifted, Lilia shifted with him. When he dodged left, she pushed energy right. When he leapt back, she sent a burst through his feet, propelling him further. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The resonance between them spoke louder than words. The first beast lunged again. Elijah spun, catching its claw with an energy barrier, then countered with a pulse of light that staggered it. The second came from behind. Lilia screamed, and he reacted instantly, twisting and slamming his forearm into its maw. Crystal teeth shattered. For every move he made, she matched it with power. For every instinct he followed, she flowed with him like a second soul. But something else was happening too. The longer they fought, the less he noticed her size. The less he noticed his own. They moved like equals, not just in strength or ability, but in essence. When their energy combined, Elijah felt his awareness stretch outward, as if her thoughts pressed lightly against his own. Not words, not images, just presence, trust, focus, shared will. The final shard claw screeched and charged them both in a straight line. Together, she whispered. He slammed his palms into the earth. She screamed a command in Selid tongue. The ground beneath the beast erupted in a web of glowing lines, resonance made manifest. Crystal veins snapped like whips, encasing the monster in a cage of light. It thrashed, once roared and exploded. Silence. Elijah dropped to one knee, panting, suit sensors flickering with heat discharge. His body trembled not from exhaustion, but from aftershock. His hands still glowed faintly. On his shoulder, Lilia danced, literally danced, tiny feet tapping across his collarbone in pure joyful disbelief. I've never felt crystal energy move like that before, she exclaimed. It was like Like we became one field, one pulse. He looked up, eyes still wide. That was impossible. She grinned. That's what makes it beautiful. Their eyes met again and the forest seemed to pulse with their heartbeat. Crystals around them shimmered in rhythm. Even the moss beneath Elijah's knee glowed brighter. She stepped lightly onto his cheek, placing her hand along his jawline. Elijah, she said softly, there's something I need to show you, something ancient, sacred. He raised a brow. You're not going to say, take me to your leader, are you? She laughed. No, I'm going to take you to a place no outsider has ever been. The crystal heart, deep in the caverns. He stared at her, still breathless. Why me? She looked at him, eyes deep and raw and honest. Because what we just did shouldn't be possible. And deep down, Elijah knew this was no longer a mission. This was the beginning of something far bigger than either of them. Something that could rewrite everything. The crystal heart. They entered the cavern just after midnight, the forest behind them glowing like a memory half faded. Elijah ducked under a jagged arch of quartz, one hand cradling Lilia close to his chest, the other lighting the path with a palm-sized burst of resonance energy. It was quiet in here, not like the forest's pulsing sentient hush, but ancient quiet, the kind that made your bones remember how small you were. This place, Elijah murmured. Lilia sat in the cradle of his hand, eyes scanning every shimmering crevice. It predates my people. Maybe all people. The Silents say it was left behind by the first harmonics, a race that didn't build empires, only resonances. He didn't know what that meant actually, but he felt it. The walls were alive, not breathing, but listening. When his boot grazed a crystal vein, the whole chamber thrummed like a cello string. This is where I brought you, she said, because I need to know. Know what? If what we have is just power or something more. She jumped from his hand, landing softly on a ledge that led toward the main chamber. Follow me. They stepped into a dome the size of a cathedral. Crystals spiraled along the walls in sacred geometry, curving inward toward a massive heart-shaped core of glowing amethyst. The moment they entered the chamber, responded light pulsed outward in rhythmic waves. The floor rippled under Elijah's boots like stepping on starlight. The heart responds to two things, Lilia said quietly. Resonance and emotion. He stepped beside her, gaze fixed on the massive crystal pulsing at the center of the dome. And if both are strong, it transforms. Before he could ask how, Lilia placed her palm against the crystal heart. Instantly, light poured outward, casting her entire body in a surreal glow. A frequency filled the chamber high and deep at once, shaking the air itself. Then it happened. Lilia began to glow, no longer softly but violently. Her entire form shimmered, flickered, then expanded. Elijah stepped back instinctively, shielding his eyes as radiant energy burst from her body. The sound wasn't a scream, it was a song, ancient and rising, a chorus born of every syllable voice across time. When the light faded, he lowered his hand. Lilia stood before him, no longer nestled in his palm, but eye level, human-sized, breathless, changed. Her lavender skin glowed softly, radiant with resonance. Her eyes, still galaxies, now brimmed with emotion so vast it eclipsed awe. And her attire, still metallic, had reshaped itself to match her new form, sleek, elegant, ceremonial. Elijah, she asked, voice the same but deeper, richer, like it carried the weight of every crystal in the chamber. He stared, he didn't move. You're enormous, he managed. She laughed, stepping forward. Says the one who used to carry me in his pocket. He reached out slowly, fingers brushing hers. The spark between them wasn't figurative. Crystal energy crackled on contact. Their skin hummed with mutual resonance. How long will it last, he asked. I don't know, she whispered. It's never happened before. Not like this. He stepped closer. You realize what this means? She nodded. Everything changes. Their lips were inches apart now. Equal. Aligned. Human and Scyllid, no longer separated by scale or fear, but bonded by something far more ancient. You said the heart responds to emotion, Elijah said. Lilia's voice barely reached air. Yes. He wrapped his arms around her waist. Then I want to see what happens if I don't hold back. He kissed her. It was nothing like before. Not a cautious press of lips against cheek. This was full, real, a fusion of light pulse and breath. Crystal formations around them responded instantly, vibrating in unison, humming a deep harmonic chord that vibrated through the floor and up into their bodies. It was music. It was fire. It was home. When they finally parted, the chamber glowed brighter than it ever had. Lilia looked dazed, exhilarated, awestruck. "I've wanted to do that," she whispered, "since the moment you picked me up from the moss. And when you thought I was going to eat you," Elijah teased. She smiled like a secret, especially then. Then it hit them. The sound, a distant screech, jagged and furious, echoing from the tunnels beyond. Shard claws. And they weren't alone. Lilia's expression shifted in an instant. Softness turned to purpose. "They followed us. We can't fight here. The heart, if they damage it." "We won't let them," Elijah said, already reaching for her hand. As they turned to face the threat together, Elijah realized something. The true danger wasn't the monsters clawing through the tunnels. It was how far he'd go to protect the woman who used to fit in the palm of his hand. And how much farther they still had to fall or rise. The trial of twin flame. They emerged from the crystal tunnels, breath still catching from their sprint energy, still sparking from their kiss. The forest had shifted again. Where once the trees pulsed softly with bioluminescence, now they vibrated with alertness. The world was aware, but the monsters were gone. Elijah narrowed his eyes. "They were chasing us." Lilia nodded, scanning the underbrush. "And yet they vanished near the heart." She paused, then added quietly, as if they feared it. Before he could respond, a soft, harmonious hum echoed through the forest. Lights spiraled above the tree canopy, weaving into a sigil Elijah didn't recognize. "They're calling us," Lilia said. "The elders." She nodded once. "They've seen." When they reached the village, everything felt altered. It wasn't fear or celebration. It was reverence. Silid villagers watched them pass in silence, bowing slightly, not to Elijah, but to them. Together. Even the children who once peeked from behind glowing walls now stood wide-eyed and still, their gazes full of wonder. "They know," Lilia whispered beside him, "about the transformation, about what it means." Elijah raised a brow. "And what does it mean?" She didn't answer. "Not yet." The Council of Elders awaited them at the high spire, a rare structure scaled to full human height. Inside, 5 Silids sat upon crystal thrones, their robes woven with living threads of resonance. Each glowed with the experience of centuries. Elijah bowed slightly. The central elder ancient, his voice like chiseled stone, spoke first. "Commander Elijah Blackwood, resonant of the outworld bearer of the crystal flame. We have witnessed your joining." Elijah blinked. "My what?" Another elder leaned forward. "The transformation you triggered when Silid and outsider united as one has not occurred in 10 generations. It is the mark of the flame bond." A third added, eyes sharp, "A bond not just of flesh, but of energy, of will." Elijah looked to Lilia. Her face was unreadable, regal. "They're talking about the trial of twin flames," she said softly. "I've heard that phrase before. In stories, myths. No one believed it was real." The eldest elder lifted his staff. "And yet here you stand." Silence fell like a blade. Then the elder spoke again. "There is a way to make your transformation permanent, to cement your bond not only between species, but between realms. It is dangerous, ancient, sacred. The trial of twin flames." Elijah straightened. "What does it require?" 3 challenges, the second elder said, each more taxing than the last. "The trial of trust," the third, began where your minds must merge, navigate the crystal maze as one consciousness. "The trial of harmony," continued the fourth, "where your strengths must fight in perfect unison against our strongest constructs." And finally, the fifth said with a grave tone, "The trial of unity, emotional resonance at its highest frequency, sustained while under maximum crystal stress. If you succeed, your bond will stabilize, your transformation will hold, your energies will be immortalized." "And if we fail?" Elijah asked. The room darkened slightly. "You will lose the ability to resonate with each other," said the first. "Forever." Lilia stepped forward before Elijah could speak. "I accept." He turned sharply. "Lilia, I choose this," she said, eyes never leaving the elders. "Not just for the transformation, not just to fight better, but because I trust him. And I—" She hesitated, then looked at Elijah. "I love him." The room vibrated. Even the crystals pulsed in reaction. Elijah's breath caught, but only for a moment. Then he stepped beside her. "Then we do this together." A deep chord rang through the chamber. The walls trembled. Crystals reformed, reshaping the room around them. Where once stood thrones and walls, now a labyrinth, unfolded walls of light and crystal alive with resonance. The elders' voices echoed in unison. Let the trial begin. The floor beneath them shimmered and split, revealing a circular chamber of mirrors and veins of pure crystal energy. Lilia stepped to Elijah's side and held out her hand. We'll have to link, she said. How deep? She smiled faintly. Thought, emotion, memory, everything. Elijah took her hand without hesitation, and the moment they touched, their minds merged. It wasn't like anything he'd experienced. It wasn't just hearing her thoughts, it was being her. He saw her childhood, her father humming into crystal veins, her mother's lullabies beneath violet trees. He felt her fears, her loneliness, her awe the first moment she saw him. And in return, she saw him, his battles, his failures, the guilt he carried from Earth, the longing he buried under military discipline. She felt the ache he never voiced, the pull he always resisted. Together, they became one pulse moving as a single entity. They stepped into the maze, and the maze answered. Walls shifted at their passing, reacting not to movement, but alignment. When doubt crept in, the walls closed. When unity held firm, paths unfolded. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. Lilia's voice bloomed inside his mind like a blossom of starlight. Your thoughts, they're sharper than I imagined, but warmer too. And yours, he replied silently, are louder than I expected, loud in the way stars burn. They moved like a single breath. When they reached the maze's core, a ring of energy flared up before them. From the light, a new figure emerged. Humanoid, towering, forged from crystal and fury. The second trial had begun, and the flame bond was far from proven. Symphony of blades and hearts. The construct towered above them, 20 feet of living crystal shaped in the image of an armored warrior. Its body pulsed with violent color shifts, red for aggression, blue for counterattack, violet for unknown. A great blade of condensed resonance extended from one arm, while the other hummed with kinetic pulses strong enough to shatter walls. Lilia and Elijah stood hand in hand at the center of the arena. Their mental link hadn't dimmed not yet, but it trembled now under the pressure of anticipation. He felt her nerves like whispers at the edge of thought. She felt his adrenaline like rising thunder. We move together, Lilia said in his mind. Always. The construct lunged without warning. No wind-up, no roar, just movement clean, impossibly fast and terminal. Elijah dropped low, dragging Lilia with him as the blade passed over their heads in a streak of searing light. He spun her behind his back, raising his left hand just as she extended her own. The shield appeared on instinct. A circular pulse of crystal energy bloomed in front of them, catching the construct's follow-up strike with a sound like mountains cracking. Right flank, she shouted. He didn't need further detail. He dove to the right, pivoting around the construct's leg, while Lilia flipped backward onto a crystal ramp and sent 3 synchronized resonance bursts at its joints. Each beam struck with surgical precision, but the construct was learning. Its leg flexed, absorbing the energy, then retaliated with a blast of its own, a concussive frequency wave that fractured the floor around them. Elijah grunted as he hit the ground hard, his HUD flashing danger warnings. But before the pain could register, Lilia was already pulling him up both physically and emotionally. You're bleeding resonance, she said inside his mind, her tone equal parts worry and focus. Tighten your field. Trying not to die kind of takes priority, he shot back. Then stop almost dying. They smiled at the worst possible moment. The construct's blade came down in a vertical arc that would have split them both, but Lilia spun into Elijah's arms, and they surged together into a resonance leap, blasting upward in a spiral of light. For a split second, they hovered midair. Their hands met, and everything changed. The battlefield slowed not literally but perceptually. Their link deepened, pushing past thought into something primal. He felt her heartbeat in perfect rhythm with his own. She saw the opening before he could speak it. Together they descended, he with fists charged in glowing force, she casting a net of harmonized resonance that looped around the construct's arms like a binding spell. They hit the ground hard, Elijah slamming both fists into the floor, sending shockwaves beneath the construct's feet, while Lilia pulled tight the energy net. The crystalline giant stumbled. Elijah didn't stop. He moved in a blur, every step reinforced by her unseen touch. Lilia whispered commands in his mind, her voice both conductor and partner. Now pulse breaker strike above the core. He obeyed, leaping forward and slamming his open palm against the construct's chest. The resulting detonation lit up the arena with an explosive burst of pure white energy. When the smoke cleared, the construct staggered, then fell, hard. Crystals shattered across the ground like rainfall. Silence, then thunder. From the walls of the arena, pulses of light cascaded down, acknowledgement of victory. Elijah collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, suit steaming with spent power. Lilia dropped beside him, her hand finding his without thought. That wasn't just combat, she said through the bond. That was art. I'd call it survival. You always reduce the beautiful to tactics, and you always make the tactical feel beautiful. She turned toward him, still breathless, still glowing. I saw something when we linked deeper, a memory you buried. He tensed. Don't. You failed to save someone. His jaw clenched. And you still carry that like it defines you. He looked away. You're wrong. She placed a hand on his cheek. Then why did I feel it as if it were mine? Their connection pulsed not with energy, but pain. Elijah's pain, long buried and now willingly exposed. He met her gaze, eyes raw. Because I don't deserve this. Not you, not this bond. Then prove you do. Their lips met again, slower this time, not born of euphoria but acceptance, of vulnerability, of truth. But something was changing. Lilia's form began to flicker. He pulled back, alarmed. What's happening? She looked down at her hands. I'm destabilizing. The energy's fading. The transformation, it's temporary unless we complete the next trial. Cracks of light appeared along her skin like splinters of moonlight. No, he whispered, reaching for her. We're not done, not like this. She gritted her teeth. The final trial, emotional resonance while under extreme stress. It's the only way to make the transformation permanent. Elijah stood, lifting her gently in his arms, even as she shrank with every breath. Then we finish it. Now. The elders' voices echoed from above, disembodied but undeniable. The final trial begins, the trial of unity. Show us not your strength nor your speed, but your truth. The chamber trembled, the lights dimmed, and the crystal heart began to glow once more. The final flame, the light in the chamber dimmed to nothing. Elijah stood alone, his boots planted on a floor of crystal, veined with dying light. In his cupped palms lay Lilia, her body flickering like a star at the edge of collapse. The transformation had unraveled entirely. She was small again, weightless and barely conscious. Even her bioluminescence had faded to a pale pulse. The elders had said nothing. There were no instructions, no threats, only the echo of their final command. Show us not your strength, but your truth. And now she was fading, their resonance failing, their bond dissolving. Lilia, Elijah whispered, his voice shaking, stay with me. Her eyelids fluttered. Her voice was dust in the wind. I'm trying. Around them, the crystal heart pulsed erratically. A tremor moved through the chamber, then another like a warning. The chamber was rejecting them. Or worse, mourning them. The trial of unity wasn't about fighting. It was about feeling. It demanded not synchronization of movement, but of soul. If they could not align their hearts, the resonance that sustained her transformation would collapse. He dropped to his knees, hands trembling, tears welling unbidden in his eyes. The commander's mask slipped. The soldier in him fractured. Damn it, he muttered. Why now? Then softly in his thoughts came her voice, thin, frayed, but present. You're scared. He swallowed hard. Of course I am. Don't be. I have to be, he said aloud. I never let anyone in. Not really. I've buried people, missions, friends, partners. I've made calls that got people killed. And I survived. Not because I was brave, but because I shut myself off. He looked down at her fading form. But you slipped past all that. You walked into the quiet places I never opened and you sang. You made me feel like I was more than what I've done. Like I could belong. Like I could, he choked. Like I could love. A pulse shot through his chest. He wasn't sure if it came from the crystal beneath him or from Lilia's body in his hands, but something moved. A flicker. A heartbeat. Say it again, she whispered into his mind. I love you, he breathed stronger this time. Not for your size, not for your power, but because you see me. And because when I see you, I don't feel lost anymore. Lilia opened her eyes, and they blazed. A surge of radiant energy erupted from her body, flowing into his arms, up his chest, into the chamber itself. Cracks in the crystal ceiling sealed. Dying light ignited. The crystal heart pulsed first in warning, then in rhythm. She grew in his hand slowly at first, then in a wave of light. Elijah stood as she expanded in his arms, her body stabilizing her skin, glowing, her breath deepening. She touched his face with trembling hands, now his equal again. I felt you, she whispered aloud. All of you, the guilt, the fear, the tenderness you never showed anyone. And it matched me, like a missing chord. I thought I'd lose you, he said, eyes damp. And I realized if I did, it wouldn't just be the end of us. It'd be the end of who I've become. Their foreheads met, and then their lips. The kiss was different now. Not urgent, not desperate, but whole. The crystal heart behind them flared white, then gold, then deep violet. The elders' voices rang out across the chamber. The trial of unity is complete. The resonance had not just stabilized, it had ascended. Together they had become flame. Legends of light. The chamber doors opened with a whisper. Elijah and Lilia stepped into the daylight together, hand in hand, pulse to pulse. Around them the forest stilled. The luminescent canopy above shimmered not just in rhythm but in reverence. The planet knew. It remembered. Back at the silent village, silence greeted them again, not out of fear but awe. The sight of Lilia walking beside Elijah at full size drew gasps, followed by quiet weeping. No solid had ever held the flame bond permanently. Not in living memory, not ever. At the steps of the Crystal Council Hall, the 5 elders awaited. You succeeded, the eldest said. The flame is now eternal. Lilia stepped forward, her voice unwavering. Not because of strength or strategy, but because we chose to feel even when it terrified us. And that, said another elder, is the rarest courage. From within his robes, the 5th elder produced a shimmering pendant, its crystal core shaped like a double helix gently spinning. For you, he said, a gift of the ancients. With it you may adjust your size at will, and in time teach others to do the same. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Others, the central elder nodded. You are not the only pairing. Lilia's eyes widened. 3 couples now request to undergo the flame bond. 2 Silid with humans, 1 with a Centaurian traitor. There was no judgment in the elder's voice, only a spark of amusement. Lilia glanced up at Elijah. You realize what this means, don't you? He grinned. We're ambassadors now. Ambassadors, she smirked. I was thinking revolutionaries. They shared a laugh, one that echoed through the crystal streets and settled in the bones of every villager who heard it. Later that evening, under twin moons, they stood on the edge of the Silid village, overlooking a field of resonant bloom flowers. Lilia leaned into Elijah's side, her glow softened to a warm violet, her heartbeat in perfect sync with his. Do you ever wonder, she asked, how different things could have been if you hadn't found me in that forest? He smiled, pressing his lips to her temple. No. She blinked, surprised. Why not? Because some things don't happen by chance, he said. They happen by resonance. She sighed, content. You're getting poetic. He kissed her again. You're a bad influence. Above them the stars shimmered, and far beyond Sylvia's ships from distant species monitored the growing shift in crystal frequencies across space pulses, once silent, now singing again. Soon the galaxy would ask what had changed. And the answer would be a girl who glowed, a man who listened, and a love strong enough to bend light. Their story would become legend, the first of many,